Alright, in this tutorial we are going to go through and set up all the resources that we need in order to create our SlopeBlend effect. I'm going to start with adding the feature to the sandbox material editor, which is the material flag. So I'm just going to start this process over again from previous tutorials. So if something doesn't make sense, then you might want to go back and look at those tutorials. So I'm just going to comment out the property for the dirt layer since it's depreciated anyway. And we're going to rename this to SlopeBlend. Property SlopeBlend. Once again, if you're wondering what each one of these things do, they're covered in the previous tutorial series, so I suggest that you go and look at the tutorial series first. I will link them in the description for this video. Okay, let's get rid of the dependency reset, because we don't really need that. Alright, so now we have a new property, SlopeBlend, that'll show up in the material editor. Now let's go into the ilum.cfx file, and let's start with the texture slots, because this is going to be the trickiest one and might require a little bit of just a little bit of tweaking and or troubleshooting. So if once again that's a pragma, and we're basically saying if SlopeBlend is enabled, then we are going to add a texture slot. So let's define our texture slot. Registered T9 is custom 1. We're going to use T9, T10, and T11 for our particular use case. So we're going to call this slope text. Let's call it slope test. This is going to be our SlopeBlend diffuse. I'm just going to rename this diffuse map for SlopeBlend. sRGB lookup needs to be true because it's a diffuse. Okay, so color, TM custom, as mentioned before in the previous tutorials, TM custom, it needs to be linked up with common.cfi. Not linked up, it needs to match the slot, the register slot from common.cfi. Once again, if you're confused about this at all, go to the previous tutorial series, and I explain it fairly thoroughly there. So we're just basically going to set up all our textures that we're going to need. We're going to need our slope norm text. You know, I'm just going to use the full moniker here because it's easier to remember for me. And then this one is going to be the, I believe it's custom secondary, but we're going to have to look just to make sure. Common.cfi. Oh, actually, wait a minute. That's in the FX sampler defs. Sorry about that. Okay, custom secondary. Yep, I was right. So I'm just going to copy and paste this so I can avoid any typing mistake. And the register is T10. If we go to the sampler defs, I'm just going to verify. Register T10, custom secondary text, texture 2D type, and here's the define for it, custom secondary map. Okay, so now this is going to be our normals. And we're just going to stick with our generic description. We're going to turn sRGB lookup off. We don't need that for the normal map. In fact, I think it actually messes it up. So let's create our third one. And this is going to be our height. Normal map for SlopeBlend. Let's change this to height for map for SlopeBlend. And this slot, I believe, is emittance. Nope, actually, it's opacity. Let's see. TM opacity. Let's just double check. Yep. Okay, so we have all our texture slots defined. I'm just going to look through and make sure my syntax is correct. Okay, looks like it. All right, I'm going to save this real quick so I don't lose it. And I'm just going to duplicate this line here so I don't have to type it again. We're going to go down to the tweakables here. I guess I'll work at the top. Put our end line declaration in there for our pragma. And we'll start by duplicating this. All right, so let's convert this to a half. This parameter is going to be, well, it depends on what we want to do first. We're going to need, for our blending, we're going to need some sort of threshold value. So let's start with that. Let's start with a threshold. So we have our threshold variable here and our reg PM parameters. So I'm going to go to here, and we're going to need probably quite a few. So I'm actually going to create 2 new ones. And once again, this is all explained in the previous series of tutorials. I definitely recommend you go watch those. But I'll just give a brief rundown as I'm doing it. The reg PM parameter is basically a stored variable that is read into the material editor from the parameters here, and this makes it so you can adjust it. So this is going to be our threshold. And I like to label things, put a little moniker at the beginning so I can make sure that all these parameters are organized together, so it makes it easier. So I'm going to set the max UI to, let's say, 10 to start with. I'm not sure exactly what we'll need, but 10 seems pretty reasonable. And then I'll make the default value that it loads into the material editor 5. Midway seems kind of nice. Okay, so SB threshold, just checking and making sure everything's lining up. All right, we're going to duplicate this. Next thing we're going to need is a deviation. So this will be our value that we use to kind of shift the blend in one direction or the other without affecting, hopefully, the mask too much. So we're just going to rename this to deviation. And this is actually a parameter that you may decide to get rid of later on. It's not totally necessary. In fact, you can cheapen the shader effect by removing it as many variables as you can, but I suggest leaving it in for now, and then you can mess with it. Then we're going to need what else do we need? We're going to need a SlopeBlend mask strength. So let's add another. Let's paste this again, and then let's have a mask strength. Or I guess this would be a blend texture strength. So this will be controlling how much our blend texture, so our height map, is affecting the mask. So, then I guess this doesn't make a whole lot of sense the way I've named it. Let's just stick with what I had before, which is the mask, this is tough. I guess we'll just say mask strength. Let's try and keep it simple. You could name it tons of different things. Once again, I'm just going to leave everything to 10 for now. I'm not particularly worried about it. Okay, now let's go through and set our regPM parameters to our new ones. So that's 7.x, .y, and 7.z, z. Okay, so we have, actually I think we defined 8 in our constant def file, right? Yes, 8 is our new one. Well, one of our new ones. So let's go through and fix that. My bad. 8, 8, 8. Alright, so we have some parameters set up that we can at least use to mess with our effect when we need to. And I'm actually going to create, this is something I just do while testing, it saves time. I'm going to create another one, and this is going to be .w for the fourth part of a float 4. And this is just going to be SB tester. And then you set the UI to like 100 max. Actually, let's set it to 50 max and -50. This just gives us a testing parameter that we can use to test effects without messing up any of our other existing code. It's great for just didn't finish that thought. It's great for just messing around with stuff. Okay. So now our parameters are set up, and all our stuff is linked up. So now we have if SlopeBlend, then these parameters will be loaded. Our regPM parameter is correct. Our naming is correct. Threshold, deviation, mass strength, and the testing function, or the testing parameter. Now we should have everything we need to start adding our code to the Common Z pass. Once again, our texture slots will not really rename if we don't pull those textures into our shader somewhere. It doesn't trigger the renaming of the interface unless that variable is actually used. So I know this tutorial is dragging on a little longer than the other ones, but I need to go ahead and basically get our textures in this same tutorial so that when we go into the editor, everything we need will be there. So first thing I'm going to do is at the end of the output, albedo, and reflectance section of the Common Z pass, I am going to add in our basically our custom code. And once again, the way that I format things, I always put the pragmas in line with the actual function code. So one tab space is inside the function because the function is the pixel shader, which is you will find up here. Yeah, right here. So here's the actual function. That's the vertex shader. Pixel shader. Here we go. Here we go. Here's our pixel shader. Common Z pass pixel shader. And I like to just kind of keep with that. To me, it's cleaner. I mean, you may decide that you don't like it, but it's just the way that I like to do things. So here's going to be our section, and I am going to comment the living hell out of it because I always have a hard time finding stuff in these files. And I like to have a particular style of commenting that just kind of stands out. So I'm just going to format this. Okay, I'm also going to do this because, like I said, it is sometimes very hard to see what the heck you're doing with so much code. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. And I'm going to reference the common.cfi to look at the functions that I will be using to load our textures. Once again, just setting the C++ language to get a little color. Okay, so I want get diffuse text, get height text, and get normal map. There's various functions. So they're overloaded, as you can see. Some take sampler states and samplers instead. We're just going to be taking a basic texture. So let's go back to the common ZPass. Well, first let's copy the get diffuse text function here. And notice that it takes a texture 2D as an input and the texture coordinates. All right, so let's define our get textures function area. So our slope diff is going to be equal to, well, first we have to declare the type. So this is going to be a half-3. Slope diff is equal to get diffuse text, and then our name of our slope text from the ilum.cfx file, which of course I already forgot. Slope diffuse text. And then our input will be in.basetc.xy. Okay, now we need our half-3 normal map, so slope norm is equal to get normal map. Just going to verify that from the common.cfi. Get normal map. I have a propensity to camel case, which is not good. Alright, so slope normal text and in.basetc.xy. Next is our height map. And check it out. It's already used in here somewhere. This would be our slope height text. And same thing as before. Whoa. Okay, so we're going to save this too. Okay, now let's start the editor and see what we broke and or where we made lots of mistakes, because I tend to make those fairly often. I am not a professional programmer, so I tend to break things often, which I think is probably a good thing in the case of tutorials, so that you can see just how much I break things and how I fix it, because that's a huge part of this process. Well, did I didn't get any errors? Holy crap. So either nothing actually worked, or it worked the first try, which would be really weird for me. SlopeBlend. Okay, there's the errors. I knew I wasn't that lucky. Okay, what do we have here? We have undeclared identifier, slope height. I added a T in there. Man, I bet you someone watching this tutorial is like yelling and screaming at me right now. Alright. Let's try this again, shall we? R, reload shaders. Okay, let's look back at our script and let's go ahead and re-engage the compiler. Not bad. One mistake. One typo. That's like a record for me. Okay. Let's look at our material editor and see if our texture slot's renamed. Yep, check it out. We have a diffuse, a normal, and a height. Nice. I kind of wish it worked the first try, but hey, no one's perfect, especially not me. So, okay, that ends this tutorial. It's just under 20 minutes, which is not too bad for getting everything we need pretty much to move forward. The only thing I didn't really set up is the UVs, the UV parameters. I'll do that at the beginning of the next tutorial. Thank you for hanging around for this tutorial. I hope I've been explaining things in a way that's understandable and or correct. So I will see you in the next tutorial.